Toot and Orbeling would like to welcome you to learning to care for sentient beings equally. Isn't that amazing? At this day and age, we really should. It is critical that we
do that.
awaken the full potential of our innate capacity for love, compassion, and wisdom. We have Eddie today coming to us from Brisbane, and Eddie's been kicking around since 1997. Thank you, Eddie, for taking time out of your day.
Thank you, Shannon. And hi, everybody. Welcome along to this new course. So, this course on how to care for others equally. We're really focusing on a topic called equanimity. So that might be a bit more familiar to all of you. So let's begin, as we normally do, by doing a short meditation, setting our motivation, and reciting a few prayers together, and then we'll actually begin the course. So please get comfortable in your seat. So this means that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. Your head is feeling quite comfortable on your neck. And you can either close your eyes or keep them open, whichever feels more natural to you. And when you're comfortable in your seat, allow the body to breathe itself, as it does every night when you go to bed and fall asleep. So this will produce a state of relaxation. While the body learns to naturally relax, with your mind, I want you to bring it down to the level of your seat so that you can actually feel your bottom on the seat. And while you feel your bottom on the seat, you are continuing to breathe normally and naturally because the body is breathing itself. The purpose of feeling your bottom on the seat is just to be grounded. Be present. When you have this feeling of presence, being at ease and relaxed, it's very easy to imagine the presence of the Buddhas in the space above you. So there's Shakyamuni Buddha with his body made of golden light, and he's surrounded by your teachers, other teachers of the lineage, other Buddhas and meditational deities, the Bodhisattvas, the Arahats, protectors, and so forth. And you think that you're surrounded by all living beings. And all of you are facing this field of refuge, containing the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and so forth. Looking around yourself, seeing all these other people, including your parents, brothers and sisters, strangers, people who give us difficulties. Recollect that every one of them including yourself, has a natural wish to avoid suffering and to be happy. Yet you, along with everyone else, are the same in lacking genuine happiness. Now, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in front of us, they sort of abide in a state of genuine happiness. They have no causes for suffering. And so to accomplish the wish that we have, in fact, that all others share, to be free from suffering and its causes and to actually be happy, it has been accomplished by others. Now we can do the same by relying upon them, the methods that they use to bring about their enlightenment and freedom, and also them as a spiritual community. This requires that we take refuge in them. So let's do that. Let's refresh the refuge that we have in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha by taking refuge in them and reciting the refuge prayer. So reciting along with me, I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And in response to this wish, I think that lights and nectars pour out from the heart of the Buddha, and they wash over you. And they remove every hindrance and obstacle and impediment to the authenticity of becoming a Buddhist refugee. Then you gaze around, you look at the others, and you see, wow, everybody else is still suffering. You acknowledge this, and you understand that this is because they haven't developed love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So you have this wish that others have these four immeasurable states. You decide to develop these four immeasurable states yourself and to help others do the same. In response to this decision, again, rays of light and nectar pour out from the heart of the Buddha. This time they wash over you and over everyone surrounding you. And you find yourself and every other living being to be established in these four immeasurable mental states. So the light and nectars have revealed these four qualities of mind to be effortlessly manifesting. Feeling empowered by these four thoughts, you respond to this refuge field by engaging in the seven-limb prayer. So reciting along with me, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and I rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. So, just in case we have any clinging left to ourselves and to the merit we've created, we're going to imagine that all of this transforms into a wonderful, pure land that we're going to offer to the Buddha and his compatriots. So recite it with me. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Iram Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnayatayami. So the Buddha accepts the offering and he looks down at us and smiles at us with delight. And we look up into his face, into his eyes, and we feel accepted and at ease. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his own heart. It moves through space and comes to abide above the crown of your own head. He's facing in the same direction you are. This emanation descends, entering the crown of your head, going down through your body, and stops at the level of your heart, whereby its radiance begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. This light overwhelms the boundaries of your skin, so it moves out through the pores of your body and begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And wherever there are beings within space, they're touched by this light and utterly transformed into the state of Buddha himself. So you find that yourself and every other living being are fully awakened, and there's no difference between yourself and anyone else. And on the next inhalation of breath, all the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space. It's brought back into your heart. And on the exhalation of breath, you can really feel yourself embodied, sitting on your seat. And you're breathing normally and naturally. And you understand this meditation was on the level of imagination and has placed an imprint upon your mind, a cause for its actual effect to take place. And so you're delighted in that. And again, breathing in deeply through your nostrils, exhale through your mouth, and allow your eyes to flutter open and move in whichever way you like, so that you feel quite comfortable again and you're in front of your screen. Okay, so let's have a look. So this course is going to last for 4 weeks. It is primarily about equanimity. And we're going to look at some of the different types of equanimity there are and what the function of each of these types is. There'll be some meditations I want to introduce to you and that we'll do. So I'm going to have a look at how this can actually apply to life. And so this is at least what I hope to be able to do. and we'll do our best. So today, we're going to start looking at some of these different types of equanimity. So we'll go through a couple first of all, and then I'll pause and we'll have a little chat about it if you wish to. We're going to have a look at some of the functions of these different forms of equanimity, and what I've called what being the same is like being equal, meaning the same as. So I want to look at introduce to you some of the ways that we are the same, or that we're equal. There's no difference between us, and we can use this understanding to further enhance the knowledge that will come about through the meditations. That will help us as we go into the meditation, and also hopefully support the meditation. And these are some of the books I've relied upon. Now, next week, they're definitely going to change, because the first two types of equanimity are explained very well, but very deeply in these two books here, Science and Philosophy in the Buddhist Classics, The Physical World, and The Inner Science of Buddhist Practice. So these are the first two types of equanimity, but they're explained much more simply in Geshe Tashi Sering's book, The Awakened Mind. So if you're going to have a look at this material, I suggest you start there with Geshe Tashi Sering's book, The Awakened Mind. Then if you choose to further investigate the other forms of equanimity, Inner Science of Buddhist Practice and Science and Philosophy. And then when we come to the immeasurable equanimity that these classes are really focused on, then this book here is a very good one too. It's quite in depth, and I'll talk about some of the different ways we can look at equanimity today using this one, In Praise of Great Compassion. Every book here is like useful. If you could actually see the amount of books I've got stacked up beside me and different commentaries from different teachers I've had, there's certainly a lot to think about, and a lot of material we can draw on to support our understanding of equanimity. So let's have a look at some of these types of equanimity. So of course, the varieties of equanimity. So there are a number of different forms of equanimity, and each of them has a different meaning. So of course, the meaning of what equanimity is will be dependent upon the context. So, but in general, there are sort of three major forms of equanimity. And the first, so what I'll do is I'll list them first. So just a little bit about them, and then we'll look a bit more in depth at them. So the first is called the impartiality of feeling. And this is just what we call neutral feelings. And so they're not pleasant feelings, and they're not unpleasant feelings. We can't sort of determine, we know that they're not pleasant, we know they're not unpleasant, they're just sort of in the middle there somewhere. And it's sort of like what we call a neutral feeling. Now, this neutral feeling, so that's it in general, but now I want to say something else about it. So this neutral feeling, one of the great scholars has called it, we could also have the equanimity of unknowing. And this has to do with the feeling. An unknown equanimity.
Eddie, is this a little bit like having a baseline, what we kind of refer to as just a neutral baseline? So you're not really aware of what's going on, but there's nothing extreme happening.
Yeah, you know that you're not feeling happy, and yet, so in terms of physical feelings, right? You don't have any. It's not great, but it's not terrible either.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so just that all that which is not this and not that, we just call it an impartiality of feeling, an equanimous feeling. So this feeling of equanimity, when it's combined with ignorance, then we have what's called dull apathy. And that's a defilement. But neutral feeling itself is not a defilement. But when it's combined with ignorance, you can have like a dull apathy. And then that's problematic. Another form of equanimity we can talk about is equanimity with respect to application. So this is the mental state which prevents lethargy and excitement when you're trying to develop like calm abiding. Yeah, so that's one form of it. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. Preventing lethargy and excitement. So some of you might be familiar with this if you've had teachings on the development of concentration. So it's a very high sort of level of awareness, which is being applied to your knowledge of what your mind is like as it's trying to develop a very stable state. And I'll say more about this when we come to the slide. And then we have what's called immeasurable impartiality. So you can see I've changed this word from equanimity to be impartial, but you could also call it non-biased. So there'll be different states, different words, which I'll use just to change the flavor of it and make it more sort of applicable to us. And immeasurable impartiality is just sort of the mind is like even-minded, equanimous. And this type of mind is very, very useful in our day-to-day life, right? Because what it does, it prevents social reactivity. So what I mean by social reactivity is like when we're out in the world, right? So we meet pleasant situations, but then we go a little bit too far with it. We get really excited, for instance. Or else we might meet some sort of difficult situation and we quickly go to anger, perhaps even hatred. So the mind's got this really up and down way of going about it when we're out in the world. And this type of immeasurable impartiality is to stop that, to prevent yelling at the people we don't like and trying to draw in those ones that seem to be attractive to us. Now, immeasurable impartiality has a number of different types also. So we have this, which we'll talk about. And one of them, which is we'll be sort of focusing more on our last class, is what they call equalizing self with others. And this is where we see ourselves having no difference between ourselves and others. But let me just now go through these two, the first two, impartiality of feeling and equanimity with respect to application. So it basically means this: feelings that are neither pleasant or unpleasant. Now, since these feelings arise naturally as responses to different stimuli, they do not need to be developed through meditation. However, the impartiality of feeling aids us in understanding the body and mind we inhabit. It's not a factor in the development of the mind of enlightenment. Feeling is just one of the mental factors. So we've got, in terms of the five aggregates, form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. Here, it's just that factor we're talking about, feeling. And of those feelings, we're talking about those that are neither pleasant or unpleasant. And this impartiality of feeling can arise in virtuous, non-virtuous, and in neutral states of mind. This is quite interesting, isn't it? So I only discovered that actually last night. We thought, wow, okay. So, but like I said, so this is quite I'm not going to go into this in any great depth other than to let you know some of these things. So if you did want to have a look into it, you'd go to those books I suggested, the big, thick ones. So, and this is from His Holiness from a book called Courageous Compassion. Now, secondly, this equanimity with respect to application. So it's a mental state which prevents lethargy and excitement from arising. And here it's one of the 11 virtuous mental factors. So while the equanimity of feeling aids us in understanding the body and the mind we inhabit, the equanimity of application enables us to more fully develop spiritually, giving us a stability, or the stability, to develop immeasurable equanimity. This is a very advanced mind. In fact, it's the last of the 9 stages of developing calm abiding, in which context is called equanimity with respect to application, or the equal setting mind. So this type of equanimity, it causes the mind to dwell naturally on its object of concentration without any exertion. Secondly, it's an antidote to being over-vigilant when we apply introspection, and then we apply antidotes unnecessarily. And lastly, equanimity with respect to application acts as, like I said, the antidote to the over-application of antidotes when none are required. So, although I've mentioned sort of briefly about these 2 types of equanimity, which is what we're not really going into at all in the next 3 weeks, right? But I did want to let you know there are many forms of equanimity. So do you have any questions at all? Miffy?
So when we're beginning to feel a little bit bored, is that like the that first equanimity of feeling, where it's just nothing and it's just about to tip over into something like, say, aversion?
So if we become bored, that's going to the negative side. So this neutral is not negative. It's just neutral.
Okay.
It's just not happy and it's not unhappy. But like I said, because our mental states are conditioned by ignorance, it can go into apathy, or like I said, not caring. For example, so when I was growing up, it was a big thing to be a young person and to be cool, you know. So what I thought cool meant was you just don't care. But like things don't bother you. So I thought that means, well, I don't care about them. They don't bother me. The way for them not to bother me is that I just don't have to care about them. So I go, a whole lot of things where I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. Little realizing that it's this mind of apathy, of developing apathy to the situations I find myself in, to other people.
Yeah, I get it.
So I didn't get the highs and the lows, but I got indifference. You become indifferent.
Yeah.
Next question.
Kodo has a question.
Yeah. Kodo, what's your question?
Hi. Sometimes the words are so different, and you go, for me, fast because I'm trying to take notes.
Okay.
So in number 2, the equanimity with respect to application, you said there were 3 things. I got the last 2, the antidote to being overvigilant and the antidote of over-application of antidotes. And what was the first one?
The first one or the third one?
First.
First. So it just causes the mind to dwell naturally on its object of concentration without any exertion.
Without exertion?
Without exertion.
What does that mean?
The mind rests. You don't need to do anything with it.
So Eddie, is that like because you said it's towards the end of those stages of meditation, it's where we've already able to perfectly concentrate, and so it's effortless.
Yeah, that's what we don't. We have the object in mind, which is mindfulness, right? We have an object, and we don't need to do any more.
But you says, did I hear it right? It causes the mind to dwell unnaturally on the object of intention?
Yeah, that's right. To dwell naturally on its object of concentration.
Oh,
without
unnaturally though, not
No, no.
naturally.
Naturally.
causes the mind to dwell naturally.
Oh, there we go. That's why it sounded so strange to me. Okay.
Okay. Well,
On the
that's okay.
object of concentration. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Sunny
That's
has
okay.
her hand raised as well.
Yeah, can you hear me
Sorry,
okay?
somebody
I
else
have-
has a question?
I do. I have difficulty with my microphone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, just Danny, yeah.
Okay. So I may be interpreting this wrong, and I could look it up in the numerous tomes I have, but I thought I'd just ask here and be part of this class. So the equanimity of application, am I interpreting it wrong, or is that the application of actually like meditation and the application of practice, and that causes us to be engender equanimity?
Gosh, Danny, I just can't make out what you're saying.
Okay, I'll put it in chat.
Okay, and then yep,
Okay.
great idea. Put it in the chat, and then if you read it out to me, and then we'll come back to it. And is that okay? Yeah. So let's and I'll go back to our little show. And we'll come back here. Okay, so now we come to what's called this. Let me just see here. What if I've done something silly? Okay. We're now going to start having a look at this immeasurable equanimity, or immeasurable impartiality, as I've called it here. So its purpose is to promote this aspect of being balanced. Right, so you can see we have this little picture here of a couple of scales, and it's perfectly balanced. So in other words, what we're trying to do is have the mind be balanced towards others. It doesn't fluctuate, go up and down. Right, again, mean by that, by going up and down with perhaps excitement and then aversion. So I see, so this type of, to develop this is being on the basis of equanimity with respect to application. So that other term we used, we're sort of meditating, we've got the mind perfectly balanced. We don't need to do anything else with it. And here it's on sentient beings. So by developing the equanimity of application, we can use that type of mind as a foundation for developing the most critical form of equanimity. So this form can be cultivated within ourselves using one or two methods, which can be based on either our wish for others' well-being or on our relationship with others. So in one sense, we're contemplating the fact that all sentient beings around us are tangled in a web of self-induced afflictions and hostility. And we're going to develop a very strong wish for all of them, that all of them be free from samsara and its causes. So it's like this is going to be like this ground that we're going to build something on. In the second sense, we cultivate a mind that is truly impartial towards all beings, holding each relationship with the same regard and affection as the next. So in effect, we're treating all beings with equanimity and developing a mind without attachment and without aversion. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this. So one is called envisioning impartiality. And this is where we usually sort of begin. And so we're going to do a meditation like this today because it's very simple to do. And you probably have heard of it before. So basically what it is, it's just the wish that others be free of the bias of hostility and greed, which is often expressed as just a mere prayer. So we just like we all have wishes for things to take place. And this is what this is. We start with this type of wish. When we know what equanimity is, we know like, wow, if everybody had that, man, wouldn't that be something? So then we have this wish that they are free from the bias of attachment and aversion. And secondly, we can do this wish and actually imagine it actually happening. So even this method here has got two parts to it. And then we have another type of impartiality called supreme impartiality. So this one is not just like this wish. This is where we have decided to free ourselves from our own emotional reactivity to others. So here we say, like I am going to develop a mind that is non-biased towards everyone. I'm going to develop a mind that has no aversion and no hatred to others, for others. So I'll just say a few things here about this. And what I'm using, is it called page 32? So this is a book called In Praise of Great Compassion. It was one of the books that I had up on the, for the books I recommended. It's one of the newer books in this library of wisdom and compassion. In fact, it's volume 5. And on page 32, it's got like 6 different forms of equanimity. But there's 4 of them that are really just applied to the second one. So I'll read you the second one, because we've talked about this, and then bring in these other aspects. So this one is called even-minded equanimity, maintains an even attitude, balances the mind and its accompanying mental factors, and makes our responses even and balanced. It is present in virtuous minds, but absent in non-virtuous minds. The next 4 types are types of even-minded equanimity that are differentiated according to the circumstance in which they arise. So these are the 4. The first is called the equanimity of purity. And this is the equanimity of the 4th jhana. So in the first 3 jhanas, even-minded equanimity maintains the balance of investigation, analysis, joy, and bliss. But in a sense, it is overshadowed by them. In the 4th jhana, these 4 jhanic factors are absent, and the feeling of equanimity is present, which enables even-minded equanimity to shine forth purely. The next one is called the divine abode of equanimity. So this is the 4th immeasurable. So you probably all know that the 4 immeasurables, this is the 4th. It is a blend of equanimity towards dear ones, strangers, and enemies, with the evenness of the mind and its accompanying mental factors. Being very peaceful, divine abode equanimity differs from the equanimity of purity only in terms of its object. Equanimity of purity arises in relation to the counterpart sign, while divine abode equanimity arises towards sentient beings. So there's no doubt a number of different terms here you may not be familiar with. And these terms really have to do with this, the development of calm abiding. The next one is called the awakening factor of equanimity. And this is the balance among the various factors of the mind that realize nirvana, or liberation. It is one of the 37 harmonies with awakening. And lastly, we have six-limbed equanimity. This keeps the mind balanced when it contacts attractive or unattractive sense objects, and when it experiences pleasure or pain. Only arhats have perfected this type of equanimity, which may be accompanied by pleasant, painful, or neutral feelings. It is the equanimity spoken of when describing an arahat. When he sees form with his eye, he becomes neither mentally pleased nor mentally displeased, but remains equanimous, mindful, and discriminating, and so on for all six senses. So I only just came across this very recently. This is a new book of mine. And I was sort of in two minds whether I should share it with you or just say nothing about it and go, oh my God, man, we're just going to be walking over here with either our heads exploding or actually nothing in the head. Yeah. So again, do you have any, I mean, all I can suggest, if you want to sort of go into this aspect of equanimity, you'll need to have a look at those other books. But for the moment, I just take it easy. Yeah, Dani, it's great. The details immense, amazing. Miffy.
I just get this overall kind of feeling from that once I relaxed and, tried to just not try and grasp onto every word of how the equanimity is pure and it's and full of wisdom. So it's not just like being dull or blank or nothing happening. It's like an equanimity that's informed with like you were saying, with awareness and discrimination. That's really what stood out to me about it.
In fact, this equanimity is pervaded by love, compassion, and joy, the other three immeasurables that came before it.
Right. So it's much, much more than the wisdom.
Yeah. Yep. Kodo, yes?
Could you please put the slide with the books there, and then I'll just take a picture of it.
Okay. Well, how about I do that at the end, Kodo? You remind me again, and we'll go
anytime.
Back to you can take the picture.
Yes.
Eddie, if I can interrupt, Kodo, they're I typed them up and put them in, and they're in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Fantastic, Michael. Good on you. Okay, let's go on now and have a look at some more at these different types of impartiality that we'll be concerning ourselves with, in the main. So here we go. Now, so this equanimity, as you can sort of understand, I think, is going to be like gradually developed by us. And one of the ways is what we call for the people of small scope. So how do, like, as beginners, how do we start? And it's simply this: we wish that all beings have overcome their afflictions towards one another. In moving on, being concerned about our own liberation, we overcome our attachment and anger towards others. So we're concerned about like attaining the liberation from cyclic existence, freedom from cyclic existence. That means we have to overcome attachment and anger towards others. And with equanimity, we can actually do that. So like this type of equanimity can be developed to really high degrees, like I said, to be immeasurable, that type of equanimity there. And lastly, in terms of the great scope, we actually overcome favoritism when directing love and compassion towards others. And this type of equanimity is the one that's what we call an equalizing self with others. That's a more stronger, deeper way of developing equanimity than the previous two, the middle scope and small scope.
So, Eddie, is the difference between those two, the middle scope is really working on our own mind and our own emotions, and then the great scope is focusing on relating with others in this perfect way?
Yep, you could say that. That's a fine way. Yeah. So this one is really, like I said, indirect. It's about us. Yeah. Whereas this one, it's about others. But that's the major way of looking at this. So we sort of, our concern is shifted. Okay. So why develop all these forms of impartiality, or at least some of them? Is mainly it's a simple thing. Our major sources of the afflictions are, of course, hatred, attachment, and this ignorance, this misapprehending ourselves and other phenomena. So as we introduced at the beginning, equanimity has sort of different connotations. And over the next 3 weeks, we're really focusing on the state of mind that is free from the disturbing emotions of attraction, repulsion, and indifference. And these are sort of based on what we call naivety, or Alexander Burson calls it naivety, being unaware of the possibility that limited beings who have aversions, difficulties, could actually be our friends. Now with us, so this is like this equanimity where we are going to free ourselves from aversion and desirous attachment. But to do that, we've got to sort of, let's say, prepare the mind. If we can dampen down at least, and then remove aversion and the hatred through either the method, like I said, it's not completely gone, but it's dampened down. Then the mind will be like what they call even. So the analogy we can use here is, well, there's two I like. One is in terms of cultivating a field. So if the field is sort of like uneven, then you just can't grow crops well in it. Plus the weather will have amazing bad effects on that land. So we want actually like flat ground, meaning we've removed all the obstacles, the weeds, the rocks, and so forth. So this is like having an even state of mind, like a flat plane, sort of open to everybody. Now, the second analogy that I like is the one where you want to paint your house, right? Or you want to paint a room. So before you put the new paint on, what you normally do is you remove the blemishes that are already there. You look for the rough spots.
Well, we know we should, but how many of us actually do that, Eddie?
And that's why you call it a professional. The professionals do that, right? So as Miffy has said sometimes here, and like Lama's Life always suggests we do, is become inner professionals. So
yeah, because in the long run, of course, if we don't do that preparation, it doesn't turn out well.
No, that's right. And that, in fact, you know, you'd have a bad paint job. In terms of this development, you actually wouldn't have equanimity. You cannot have equanimity without this sort of planing down, getting everything even first. And if we don't have the mind even, then we'll continue on with these biased states of mind. So then we're going to keep behaving the same way we do to others, having desirous attraction, lust towards others, greed, and then on the other side, anger, hatred, aversion, and again, indifference. So that's where we are at present, right? So we need to sort of smooth the surface of the mind. And if you ask yourself, why do we want to do that? We've got three reasons again. So you want to defeat aversion, which is based on a biased hostility. So that's one. You want to defeat aversions, which are based on
Eddie, just
biased
stop the
hostility.
share for a moment too.
The second is that you want to defeat your attraction, which is based on a biased, desirous attachment. And lastly, you want to defeat indifference, which is based on biased naivety. So that you end up having a mind that's free of repugnance and longing. So what might be some of the ways that we can do that? So one is, of course, is to develop what they call these four immeasurable thoughts. So I'll just sort of come to that. So here, these are the four immeasurable thoughts that you're all familiar with, right? So we say, may all beings have happiness and its causes. So here we call this the immeasurable thought of love and kindness. Now you can concentrate on what they call the sign of this. Like say, you know, so deeply in you, there's a sign that you have it. And you to meditate on that particular sign, and you develop calm abiding, and then you go beyond it into what they call the jhanas. And so you get to the first jhana. But then this leads you to the second jhana, may all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes, which leads you to the third jhana, may all sentient beings never be separated from sorrowless bliss. But all of these jhanas there's a danger there. There's dangers there. But all of these dangers are overcome with the fourth immeasurable thought of equanimity. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. So here His Holiness says, and this is from the book called One Teacher, Many Traditions. He says that the preceding three immeasurables of love and kindness, compassion, and joy are risky because attachment and anger are not far away. For example, while developing love, attachment could arise instead. And also the previous three immeasurables are associated with happiness. which decreases the depth of concentration. Thus, seek equanimity, a constancy or steadiness of mind. With equanimity, we are free from longing and aversion for others. We accept happiness and suffering by understanding that they arise due to karma created by that person. So this equanimity is not indifference, for meditators have already gained the jhana on love, compassion, and joy. While equanimity remains peaceful and receptive, the three previous immeasurables imbue it with calm affection for sentient beings and balanced involvement with them. Isn't that nice? Calm affection for sentient beings and a balanced involvement with them. Like I said, now before we do that, so let's any final questions
Eddie,
on this section? Yeah.
when you said that the danger that can you just reiterate that again, the danger of those first three without the equanimity?
Well, each of the those states, right? So loving kindness, compassion, and joy have what they call near enemies. So as you try and develop one, you might actually develop the other, and you don't want to do that. So with love and kindness, with this affection, of course, then the danger with that is that you actually develop attachment, or you keep attachment in the picture. So when it's with compassion, for instance, you get this sort of what do you call it? Sort of the normal thing that people do, which is it becomes sort of your mind sort of sinks and you become sort of unhappy. In the face of suffering, you become unhappy. So each of these has dangers to them as you developing them. And equanimity takes that away, makes it all nice and pure.
Then how is that is the equanimity at the end there because it's an antidote to all those? How come like it doesn't come first? Or is there it has to come last because you got to have equanimity about something?
It's just it's the most refined state in these terms of the jhanas. Okay, so now I want to take you into something that's not normally put up in this discussion, but I thought it'd be very useful. I found it very useful for myself. Right? And these three next slides, or 4 slides, 3 or 4, where I'm sort of looking at how we look at ourselves and how we look at others. And how, when we do, we don't see ourselves as being the same. We often see ourselves as being very different. Now, if we sort of, not only do we see ourselves as different, but we cling onto the appearance of that difference and think it is really this way. So I want to introduce you to an analogy. It's a really nice little story. And then what it means, what we can draw from it. So let's do that. So this meditation is often given when we're looking at, it's sort of put forward as a preliminary to great compassion. Now, often in the text, like Lama Tsongkhapa does it this way, Lama Atisha did it this way, the Buddha did it this way, but there are other ways of doing it. Other teachers have done it other ways. So we start off with developing like equanimity and then building on that. But it's possible to start off with compassion and build, and then through the compassion, seeing the equanimity. This is one of the ways when the great Kadampa masters did it. And so in relationship to that, yeah, they start off with compassion, and they talk about the different forms of compassion. And when Chandrakirti, he pays homage, he says, now I pay homage to great compassion, not to any of the deities or anything like that, it's to great compassion. And this great compassion is sort of three aspects. And the first is what they call observing the mere living beings. But let me tell you about this little picture here and the analogy. So we have a bucket, and it's tied by a rope to a wheel, right? And it's got to go down into this well to pull up the water. So just as the bucket is tied by a rope to the wheel, so are we, bound by past actions, contaminated by the afflictive emotions of lust, hatred, and ignorance. That's how we're bound, right? And the bucket is bound by the rope. Secondly, just as the turning of the wheel, be it a water wheel with many buckets strapped to it, or just the windlass with one bucket, like in the picture, this depends upon a person operating it. So our wandering in cyclic existence depends upon consciousness. Thirdly, just as the bucket travels down to the bottom of the well and up to the top, we travel among the stations of cyclic existence, being born over and over again as humans, hungry ghosts, hell beings, demigods. And fourthly, just as the bucket descends easily in the well, but it's difficult to draw upward, even with hard work, so our own tendencies of mind, our lust, hatred, and ignorance, are such that we are easily drawn down into the lower states of existence. But to change the momentum of the movement from the lower states to the higher ones, man, that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort just to be happy now, doesn't it? As a human being. So 5, just as with the turning of a water wheel or the watering of the bucket in the well, the order of what happens is difficult to determine. So our afflictive emotions, actions and sufferings which lead to one another make it impossible to determine in general the order of the three. And lastly, you know, when you put these buckets down, often they don't just go like straight down. And when you pull them up, they don't come straight up, like they swing from side to side, they bash against the side of the well. So just as the bucket is battered against the walls of the well, so are we battered by the sufferings of mental and physical pain. So powerlessly, sentient beings are wandering among these bad states and better states and getting bashed about in each one. And so this is this analogy or metaphor, and I've used Jeffrey Hopkins' book, A Truthful Heart, where this analogy is sort of written like I've explained to you quite nicely. He has talked about it in other situations, but not as clearly as in that particular book. There was A Truthful Heart, page 189. So what's this showing us? In what way are we equal to everyone else? That's what I'm trying to draw out here. And that is that we, like everyone else, are out of control. We don't have control over ourselves. Okay? So this is one thing. We can look at ourselves and others and go, well, we're the same. We're equal in our lack of self-control. Not only that our happiness and suffering are the result of our own karmic actions. We create our own suffering and our own happiness. Every state of happiness we experience, every state of suffering we experience, is a result of our own karmic actions. And that goes right across the board. Any sentient being is the same. What's really interesting about that, I thought, was we are equally not to blame for our own problems. That's interesting, isn't it? So what do you think's equally to blame for our problems and the problems of everyone else? Anyone?
Karma and delusion.
That's it. Thank you, Sue. Karma and delusion, karma and affliction. But right across the board, anyone who's suffering, it's the same. We're the same. The next one I like to say about this is we are equally not to blame for the problems of others. Because why? It's like it's karma and delusion. So I remember like years ago when Rinpoche gave, Geshe Tashi Tsering gave us the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. And like I've never forgotten this. He said, what do you take away from this? What should you take away from the first noble truth is, look, you're not in control. There isn't anybody who's in control. And it goes right across the board. So we're all equal like that. Our suffering is equally dependent upon karma and delusion. And so is our happiness. We want to be free. We want to develop virtue. And so virtue is common right across the board. So this is first using the example of the well and the bucket. So I've given you some ideas here of how we are the same as one another, how we're equal. And please think about this. Like maybe just write a short note down and look around at other people. Look at just other people and say, like, we are the same in that neither of us are in control.
So, Eddie, this one's really good when looking at politicians, actually, because it takes it down to a really deep level, doesn't it? So that it's not kind of ignoring the harm, for instance, but it's taking it deeper than that.
Yeah, and with politicians, you see most of them belong to political parties. And the political parties have agendas, so the leaders just can't run out there and go and do their own thing. You know, they've risen independence. Now, the next phenomenon we can use here is it's called observing phenomena. But again, it's still related to sentient beings. So Chandrakirti here is using the image of the reflection of the moon in rippling water. So he asked us to imagine a lake and there's a light breeze and the water is covered by the ripples. It's a cloudless night. So the full moon is reflected in the water. And you can see how the reflection of the moon in the water sort of shimmers and flickers. So you hold that in mind, you go, yeah, I've seen all that. Then quickly switch across to a person and see that the person exists in very much the same way. Evanescent, transitory, impermanent, like the shimmering reflection of the moon in rippling water. So all sentient beings are qualified with impermanence. We are all subject to change and death. So in the first one, we saw sentient beings qualified by strong suffering. In this case, we see not only strong suffering, but also impermanence. Again, from Jeffrey Hopkins, he says, when you see the body of a person, its impermanence appears to your mind, but your mind doesn't notice it. That's interesting, isn't it? It's true. You know, I remember once going to an old age home to see a woman, my good friend's grandmother, and there was another woman on the bed next to her, and her back was turned to us, so she was sort of huddled up. So when I looked across, all I could see was her back. Then my eyes went up to a photo of her on the wall on her wedding day. Oh my gosh, you beautiful woman. And then she rolled around and there was this woman that didn't look anything like that picture. You couldn't put the two together. And I just look at the two and go, oh my God, there's the impermanence. You know, the body is subject to change and decay, old age, and then finally death. Hopkins goes on to say that sitting in meditation and looking at a moon in shimmering water is a means of giving us a clear image of how we should begin to see others. The purpose of using the picture of evanescence is to expose our usual overlay of solidity in order to reveal what's actually there. In time, you will be able to see such phenomena as walls and bodies in this way, composed of many, many particles which are all moving.
Eddie, this is
Yeah.
actually, it's so nice because you know, when now that I look in the mirror and I notice how my face is kind of like melting off me, you know, it's just slowly, and
Where?
yeah, you could get a bit depressed about this, but think about it like this, like how you say effervescent or evanescent or whatever the word is. But it's much nicer thinking of this reflection of the moon and how it was never stable than to just now start noticing the whole face melting off your bones syndrome, which probably started when we were a baby, right? But I'm only just noticing it now. It's much more heartening this way because it's much more, of course, it was never solid to start with.
That's right. Oh, that's right. So all of us are getting older. We're all getting older. But I mean, those of us who notice it will notice how the under here changes, under the throat changes, the jowls change, especially in men, the faces get a bit thicker.
And I've got to tell you, everybody, when me and Eddie, we went off to the doctors and, you know, you have to tell them how old you are. And so then when, you know, when I said how old I was, which is 55, Eddie's like, what? He was shocked. And he actually said to the doctor, I thought you weren't even 40. How sweet.
So where we are the same, where we are equal is in that we are all subject to change. Again, this goes like I said, right across the board. And this next one is the one I particularly like. It really sort of resonates with me. And it could do with you too. So it's this observing the unobservable. So this is an equanimity which is maintained by a mind realizing that living beings are empty of inherent existence. That inherent existence is unobservable in relation to every sentient being, although we all seem to have it. That's the other commonality, right? We look right across and go, oh my God, every sentient being seems to be inherently existent, but in fact, inherent existence is unobservable. So it's not observed that a sentient being truly exists because the way we exist and the way we appear to exist, they're different, they're false. So here again, from Jeffrey Hopkins, he says, in meditation, imagine a calm lake on a cloudless night. A full moon is reflected in the water, but you don't know that a lake is there. You're actually looking at the reflection of a moon in water, and you think you're seeing the moon. A reflection of the moon in water appears to be a moon, but it's not. Sentient beings appear to exist inherently, but do not. When you get used to looking at the moon in water, seeing from every side that it is not a moon, although it appears to be. And when you look at a sentient being, you can use this as an introduction to the fact that although you experience the person, it seems to exist like right there on the person's own side. This is not the case. So I remember like this, I was at this concert and it was being played not too far from a large industrial place, which dealt with sewage works. Right? So in the sewage works, they had all these ponds. And it was just like you're saying, a really still night and the full moon. And the full moon was reflected in each pond. And I was looking at it going like, wow, that's just like the texts. That's how they talk about it, you know? So I'm looking at it and going, shit, the moon really appears to be in the water. And that's true, it does. And you go up and look at it and go, no, I think, I'll turn around and look at this person, I think, and the person really looks to be in there, either in the aggregates or they are the aggregates. Like, you know, mistaking the moon in the water to actually be the moon. No, it's not the moon. So that really gave me this insight. I've always liked it since then. I go, well, anything with a reflection, I can use that because it looks like it's, you know, in the surface of something or beneath the surface of something, when in fact it's not. So here again, we can say this is, we have in common with one another, right? Every sentient being is empty of inherent existence. Now, the flip side of that is really also interesting because this is also what we have in common. So if we say that every sentient being is empty of inherent existence, we would say, well, okay, well, so how do we exist then? And your answer will be in mere name. Right across the board. It's just the name I. And it's just imputed. It's just a given. It's not in the body and the mind. It's not the totality of the body and mind. It's just the name. And all of you have a sense of I, and so do I. And it's not inherently existent. It's dependently existent. In name only. So to me, that's like, you know, that's probably the deepest form of equanimity we can get at. Is going, yeah, you know. So that's great. I thought, oh my gosh, now I've gone so fast. We've got to the end. But actually, I said, well, okay, so how can we use this? So we know that we lack inherent existence. We exist in mere name. We and everyone else. Okay? That all the sentient beings, like us, are subject to change, and that every sentient being has no control over the aggregates. So just, you know, I'm not saying just hold all that together, but sort of hear it and sort of just go, okay, so I'm not good. I know myself. I don't have very good control of lack of major control over my body, speech, and mind. I'm subject to change and death, and I have no inherently existing I. Miffy, yep.
I'm just thinking that what's so nice and really stands out to me about this is that by thinking in this way, it changes how I feel. Whereas normally when I think of equanimity, I think, oh, I've got to change how I feel and then I'll get equanimity. But actually it's come the other way around. It's kind of relaxed everything enough for just for a moment, some kind of clarity to come up, and then equanimity seems to be like the natural result. The feelings change.
That's right. Yeah, so this is a lovely thing you find, but I mean, why I think reasoning and analysis is so important in the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, of the Buddha Dharma, right? That you can use rationality, logic, and suddenly what you used to feel and how you used to behave will change. Right? You've brought something new into the picture. So we'll do this the simple first type of meditation, whereby we're just having this what you call envisioning impartiality, envisioning equanimity. So we've all got our little screens on, so you can see one another. And
Eddie, you have to, no, Eddie, you've got to stop the screen share.
Just about to do it. And
Yeah.
so there's plenty of people you know. So I want you to take somebody who you don't know very well, what you might call, they haven't hurt you, they haven't done anything great for you can recollect. Maybe just shopkeeper, the person we would call the stranger. So just think of them and know how they actually exist. This person lacks control. They're subject to change and death. They exist in mere name. May this person be free from the bias of attachment and aversion. Then take someone close to you. Go through the three things again. This person is close to me, lacks control over their body, speech, and mind. They're subject to suffering. They're also subject to change and death. And they exist in mere name. May this person who's close to me, even name them, may this person be free from any bias of attachment and aversion to others. You take somebody who's hurt you or somebody you care about, somebody you don't like or who doesn't like you. And again, just to think, okay, this person, they don't have any control of their body, speech, and mind, or very little control. They're subject to change and death. They exist in mere name. They have no true identity. They're not knowing most of this. They have a bias. From the bias they develop attachment and aversion. May they be free of these. Then, if you like, even move it across to perhaps a dog or a cat, some pet you feel close to, an animal. These beings are also out of control, having very little control, subject to change and death, having no true identity and existing mere name. May they be free from any type of bias which produces the attachment and aversion. Now put yourself in the picture and say to yourself, well, I'm a sentient being. Do I have control over my aggregates? Do I have control over my body, speech, and mind? Am I subject to death and change? Do I have a true, real I? Is my body, speech, and mind I? No. These lack inherent existence. They exist in mere name. Well, then may I too be free from the bias that arises from attachment and aversion and indifference. So we have these groups of people. Now, put yourself there now, see yourself, a stranger, the person you originally liked, the person you're afraid of and who's harmed you, and some animals. And see how we're all the same. We're all subject to karma and delusion. We're all subject to impermanence and death. All of us lack a true identity and exist in mere name. We're exactly the same. Maybe be free of any bias that produces attachment and aversion to one another. And imagine if that was the case. So not only that we wished it, imagine it's actually taken place. So now we have control of our body, speech, and mind. This is possible. We're no longer subject to the fluctuations of change and death, uncontrolled death. That we no longer grasp at a true me. We no longer grasp at the world as being real and cling to its reality, because we realize it just exists in mere name. Can you imagine a world like that, where people were like that? What they'd be free from? No hatred, no lust, no greed. May it come to be. And that's that. So this is a very simple way, of becoming familiar with equanimity. Or I say meditating on equanimity. It just means becoming familiar with these ideas. So how can we help our own equanimity to develop? First, understand what it is. So here we're really talking about this development of equanimity. So we're not talking about the equanimity of feeling or the equanimity with respect to application. Here we're really concerned with having a mind that is equanimous, that is free from the bias of attachment and aversion. So not only does it require us to understand how to develop equanimity, we have to actually understand why and how aversion and attachment are harmful. Right? So you'll often see with these topics, they sort of cross over, interrelate, and you find, I was just going to learn about equanimity. Now you're telling me I've got to go aversion and attachment too? Yeah. We need to understand what it is so that we don't get drawn into attraction, repulsion, and indifference. Next, remember, don't forget. Remember what you've understood and then have the discipline to apply it. And of course, from my readings of equanimity, it can take a long time to develop it. But so, and yet without it, there's really no spiritual development. It's very, very difficult to say how you could be developing spiritually without having equanimity. So don't give up. Try, and just as you're here engaging in these classes, we're spending an hour and a half together each Monday. This is good. It's good. Take some of it away with you, and just like I said, look around at others and look at others and say, we're the same, you and I. In these ways, we are the same. Miffy.
There's a comment from Alicia saying that it's interesting that in that meditation, the person I don't like seemed far more concrete than the others, and it was harder to accept emptiness applying to them than it was to myself and the others.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Alicia, and we'll go into that in the presentations the next 3 weeks. This is exactly what you find. When you actually go to do it, suddenly funny stuff starts to happen. So we basically come to the end of our class for today. Let's have a look what's our takeaway. Well, I hope you know, there's a number of different types of equanimity, and the meaning always depends upon the context. We've really looked at today, how to meditate on equanimity from the perspective of the small scope, just this wishing type of meditation. Now we looked at some of the ways how we are, our sameness, in the fact that we lack control, subject to change and death, and we exist in mere name. So these qualities, even though we won't speak about it much in the next couple of weeks, in the last week, we'll certainly be talking about their quality in mere name. Because if you get that, boy, oh boy, does a lot of it open up for you. But without it, it's just as you're saying, as Sue was just saying, Alicia was just saying, then it becomes quite hard. So next week, we're going to look at the equanimity training of supreme impartiality for those with middling capacity. So there's a new 2 meditations in there we're going to do. And this is the one where we're really sort of looking at our being responsible to ourselves. And we're saying, well, I'm going to have to do it. It's not enough just to read about all this material and listen to teachings. I've actually got to stop the bias that my mind produces and sort of have, a biased affection, a biased aversion, and so forth. So let's dedicate what we're engaged in our study today and say that due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And may the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow. And may that born have no decline but increase forevermore. As long as space endures and as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. Okay, so thank you very much and stay alive. Do good, and we'll see you all again next week. Okay, bye-bye.